Today we check out the Hisense U7Q ULED Quantum Dot Mini LED. Up next.
I've seen things people wouldn't believe.
Hey, what's up guys? I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for joining me as we check out the Hisense U7Q ULED Quantum Dot Mini LED. Now I love Hisense's approach this year. They showed their elite, almost prototype-like models at CES, leaving their most popular mini LEDs at home, building the anticipation. We've already checked out the U8Q, which I still have here, but now we have the more popular U7Q. You'll also see how it compares to last year's U7N, but the U7Q strikes that perfect balance between excellent performance and tremendous value. Without further ado, let's check out the Hisense U7Q ULED Quantum Dot Mini LED. Thank you so much for watching. Alright guys, let's do a quick unboxing of the U7Q with last year's U7N looking on. The actual name of the Hisense U7Q is the U7QG. Let's quickly unbox it, show you what's inside. And the reason why I do unboxings is not just to show you what's inside, but to show you how well these TVs are packaged as they are shipped to you. You have the two separate pieces that form the center stand with the plastic cover, and the TV is very well packaged with a huge piece of cardboard protecting the screen, styrofoam everywhere. Now the back looks very different than last year's U7N. For audio, we have a Dolby Atmos 60 watt 2.1.2 multi-channel sound system. We have a new screen coating as well. What I like seeing from Hisense is a big difference in terms of build quality from the year before and the year before that. Looking at the back of the panel, again, the speakers are placed differently. You have a detachable power cable. This detachable power cable is beefier than last year's. I'll show you that in a moment. And for the inputs, we lose the display port that was on the U8Q in favor of 4 HDMI 2.1 capable of 4K 165 Hz. Truthfully, I'd rather have the extra HDMI than the display port. You have the manual. The backlit remote is one of the best in the business. You have the screws, the power cable, batteries, and the stand assembly. As I mentioned, you have a beefier power cable on the U7Q than last year's U7N, which is right here. The TV is super easy to assemble with the legs only going in one position. Place them in, screw them in, and you're all set. You have a square back versus the angular back of the U7N. And then the centerpiece slides right through, clicks in, and you're good to go. You have rubber feet throughout the bottom of the plastic stand. It's actually a little bit sturdier than the U7N from last year due to the more square backing versus the angular one. And just like that, we're done. We'll place it next to last year's U7N. We have a new AGLR anti-glare reflective screen, though the screen is actually a bit glossier. Now we have the plastic on it, though it will retain that same reflection. So you have a glossier screen on the U7Q just by a little bit. The TV also stands a bit higher. You only have that one position center stand. And there's a difference in glare. That doesn't really change even with the plastic off. It's a little less glossy with the plastic off, which I'll show you momentarily. And in the back, here is the difference between the two panels. The new U7K has more in common with last year's U8N, which is a good thing. Better build quality, better speakers, and you also now have 4K, 165 Hz, and 4 HDMI 2.1. So it is quite the upgrade. Build quality is better in every way. And that's something you want to see from these manufacturers, is big jumps in both build quality and performance each and every year. We go right into the retail mode. I love putting Hisense TVs in their retail mode. It gives you a bit of information, though the retail mode is not as good as the U8Q. At least I couldn't find it, but it is wrapped in a ton of plastic. The TV is very well protected. It actually took me about 20 minutes to get all of the plastic off of the screen and the bezels. Very minimalist design, small Hisense badging. Definitely approve of the design, especially for the money. Now, right out of the box, you're going to be in the HDR energy savings preset, which is fine, but what you're going to want to do is go over to the intelligent settings tab, and you're going to see the automatic light sensor is enabled by default. Now, while it is a cool feature that changes the brightness of the television based on the ambient light in the room, you're going to want to turn that off initially to get the full brightness of the U7Q, and it is insanely bright, much like last year's U7N, which felt like it was brighter than the U8N. The U7Q feels brighter than the U8Q. Now, it isn't necessarily, it's just how the U7Q handles that brightness, which has more to do with local dimming and the more aggressive local dimming on the U8Q, but you can also see how well the U7Q does in a very bright room. There are windows, massive windows to the left of me, and you'll see me in a second walk in to the frame. Now, while the reflections are there, the room is insanely bright. We'll move back into my studio momentarily, but the TV is actually very beautiful. We've moved into the HDR theater preset, which is my favorite preset on Hisense TVs, as that preset is a good mix of brightness and accuracy. It's not quite as saturated as the other presets, which are vivid, sports, and standard. They are insanely bright, but they can be unwieldy at times. So I like to keep it in HDR theater. We'll jump in and out of all the presets throughout the video. We'll check the local dimming here and in my darker studio, but on angle, it's excellent. Off angle, you'll see a bit of blooming. Again, an improvement over last year's U7N. Not quite as good as this year's U8Q. And you'll see blooming, but you have to get way off angle to really notice it. Dead center, it's excellent. Now, if you purchase the U7Q, again, get it out of its energy savings preset, turn off the automatic light sensor, put it in HDR theater, and you're pretty much good to go. Though you do have a filmmaker mode as well. We'll show you that again later in the video, especially we move in to my studio. You can see the lights behind me. I apologize for that, but I want to do some of this in a brighter room, not just to show you the bright room performance, but to really be able to show you the chassis. Sometimes when I do these reviews, we get right into a dark room and can barely see the chassis. Now here it is compared to last year's U7N, both in the HDR theater preset. Now, seeing them side by side, at first glance, the U7N looks brighter. It's much like last year's U7N versus U8N. Much more depth and better local dimming on the U7Q. But thinking that the U7N is brighter, when in reality the U7Q does have brighter specular highlights and has a much more 3D image. As you see here on Jen's content, going from 2000 nits to 4000 nits, the brightness is nearly the same on the U7Q. There's just much more three-dimensionality, much more depth, and a much better image overall. It's great having these side by side, but the comparison of the U7N to last year's U8N is actually a great jump if the U7Q matches and maybe even surpasses last year's very good U8N. Getting the TV into my studio, we're now in not the darkest room, but a moderately lit room. And as you can see, the local dimming is excellent, even on very bright content from our good friend Jennifer Gala. Now in the U7 for processing, we have the same processor as the U8, which is the HiView AI Engine Pro. The HiView AI Engine X is what you'll see on the 116UX and the U9Q. Now in all my time with the U7Q, this is the only shot where I saw a bit of blooming on center. However, we are at about 3000 nits in that shot, nothing in this shot. So the local dimming, again, very impressive, especially dead center. We'll see that a little bit later in the video in a completely dark room. I'm very happy with the image. Again, very bright, very vibrant. The colors are very saturated and kind of all over the place in the other presets other than theater, filmmaker, and IMAX. You can change that yourself, but we'll also show you the flexibility of image momentarily. We do now have this picture customization feature that they've added. We'll run through this very quickly, but I do love that they've added this personalized customization mode. When you do enable this and go through the different shots that you prefer, it's global, meaning in HDR 10+, in Dolby Vision, you'll have another customized picture mode even in gaming, which I love. We'll go through the presets very quickly, but having that customized picture preset follow you through all of the other modes is awesome. Dolby Vision, gaming, HDR 10+, very cool to have that. We'll fly through the settings to be able to show you what you can change, and there are a lot of ways to customize each preset to whatever you prefer. And for me, why that's important is the most accurate image isn't something that everybody wants. Somebody wants strong motion interpolation, which we'll cover in a moment. Some want very bright, saturated, dynamic colors. I like you to have your own choices and what you deem your favorite for your own personal use case, also depending on the content that you watch. Moving into our motion settings using very fast moving content from Jennifer Gala, you have your motion enhancement settings. We'll go through those quickly, moving them around. You also have your motion clearness, which is basically black frame insertion. Now it gets not very dim or changes the brightness much, but enough to where I wouldn't utilize it anywhere above low. Now the clear didn't add any flicker that was really noticeable unless you're very sensitive to it. However, I don't like dimming the image at all if possible. Again, keep it at low, but there is a lot of flexibility as you see here in the custom motion enhancement tab. So if you like strong soap opera, you can push that here, but again, there's a lot of flexibility, not just of image, but of motion as well, which is very important for everything from your films, your games, and your sports. Now, if you see a hexagon-like pattern anywhere in the content, that is simply how my camera picks up the anti-glare as well as the frame rate. It is not there in person at any time at all. I like the motion on the U7Q. Again, a lot of ways to customize your motion. Let's move into local dimming. As I mentioned earlier in the video, dead center and on angle, the local dimming on the U7Q is excellent, especially in our local dimming drip here. The U7Q will remain very bright regardless of what's on screen. It will not dim with bright highlights as you see here. Now the price of that is off angle, you will have blooming. Not severe blooming as I do have the exposure up a little bit, but it is there. So not the widest viewing angle. The colors are fine off angle, they don't change much. However, the local dimming will suffer. Again, we're very extreme off angle with something that is very bright, but it is there and I wanted to show it to you. Dead center, as you see here on our train test, the U7Q is excellent. Let's look at natural colors in our filmmaker preset. Special shout out to the one and only Jennifer Gala and her second channel, HDR Super Channel. The majority of the content seen within this video and in the intro is from both of those channels. Check the description below for links to both channels and consider becoming a Patreon member to Jennifer's main channel. You'll be able to download all of this amazing work in full Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. Thank you so much, Jen. Now the U7Q ranges in sizes from 55 inches to 100 inches, and the sound is also very good. And you saw earlier we have the Google operating system in place. Not much to go into there. It does move around very quickly. I also like that you don't have to go in and enhance the HDMI inputs right from the jump. They are enabled, not in standard like some other manufacturers. So it does have a very beautiful, vibrant, saturated look, but you want to be smart about what presets you put it in. If it does feel too bright or too saturated, move it down to HDR Theater. You'll be good to go. And HDR Impact is the name of the game for the U7Q in each and every preset. Speaking of presets, let's move into the Vivid preset to see how bright the U7Q actually gets. It is extremely bright. The whites are very bright. The colors pop. Very, very bright TV. Again, especially at this price point, probably the brightest TV out there. Going from the Vivid preset, let's get into some SDR footage. Now, if you feel like filmmaker mode in any TV in SDR is not bright enough, I recommend wandering outside of filmmaker mode. If you're watching sports, I wouldn't watch it in filmmaker mode. That's why there's a sports preset. Guys, use the presets. That's why they are there, and that's why they're labeled what they're labeled. You also, with Hisense, have extra presets added, such as Theater Day, Theater Night, and then PC Game. So for SDR content in any TV, if you feel like it's not bright enough, wander outside of that filmmaker preset. Now the filmmaker preset is not super bright in SDR on the Hisense U7Q. I wouldn't expect it to be. We'll use sports and warm it up a little bit for this demo here. Being in the sports SDR preset, you can see the image is very bright. If you do feel the image is too cool, you can always warm it up within the preset under color. So I recommend getting out of filmmaker whenever you're viewing SDR content, and you'll see the image is very bright, especially on a TV as bright as the U7Q. We'll actually start this next demo in SDR filmmaker mode, and I'll show you that it isn't the brightest TV. Again, I don't expect SDR to be bright in filmmaker. We'll go through the presets: Theater Day, Theater Night, PC Game. We'll settle on standard, and you'll see how bright and punchy the image is. Again, if SDR feels not bright enough to you with any TV, get out of filmmaker mode, move into those other presets. That's why they are there. Very colorful, very punchy. You'll be very happy with the SDR brightness of the U7Q. Now let's move away from SDR into Dolby Vision. We have several presets. We have your Dolby Vision Custom, you have your Dolby Vision Dark, you have Dolby Vision IQ, Dolby Vision Gaming. Now the Dolby Vision Custom is actually that global setting we actually set way back earlier in the video with that personalized customization. As I mentioned, it carries through. Now Dolby Vision has been improving each and every year with Hisense, and it looks excellent here. We're using the Spears and Munsell calibration disc. You can see it handles the gradients and the specular highlights very well. We're here in Dolby Vision Dark, as Dolby Vision is also very bright on the U7Q. So I would keep it in Dolby Vision Dark. It never feels too dark. You can see the local dimming behaves wonderfully in Dolby Vision Dark. Now, if you're in a bright room, move it up to IQ, but also play around with that customization, personalized setting we did earlier in the video to get things to your liking, and see how you like that as it goes throughout the entire settings of Dolby Vision, HDR10 plus, SDR. Let's move into gaming. Now for gaming, it's absolutely fascinating. The picture quality for the game mode is absolutely gorgeous. It's not super bright, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Now we're going to stay with the PS5 Pro. I am going to do a PC gaming and a gaming video for the U8Q and the U7Q separately. So we'll cover PC gaming there, but I can confirm that the 165 Hz does work. You have 1080p 288 hertz as well, which I have not tested yet. Going through the game bar, I do love the game bar for Hisense. It does have a very cool theme setting. I'll show you in a minute, but you do have your separate presets. You have your standard, your RPG, FPS, RTS. They do look very different, but what you're looking at here, I'll change the theme to actually, you have Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo, which I'll leave it. I like the Nintendo one, is even though this isn't the brightest game mode, look at the specular highlights. The clouds in the background while I'm showing you the crosshairs and the other game bar stuff. That image is beautiful. It's not the brightest game mode, and you'll see why in a moment, but the image here is what I actually prefer. Not super bright, but the specular highlights really pop, and it doesn't look washed out at all as I show you the different crosshairs and how you can customize them. Now back to the brightness, dynamic tone mapping is disabled by default. Now some will argue, before we move into the other settings, that not having dynamic tone mapping on is the same as HDIG. Some companies have an HDIG toggle. As we go through the settings here, you do have AMD FreeSync Premium, high refresh rate mode. You can also put the FPS counter all over the screen. You can choose which corner you would like it. But as you see here, we move into the different picture modes outside of game mode. You'll notice how much brighter they are than the actual game mode. You'll see it here in a moment. Even filmmaker mode is brighter in HDR than your HDR game mode. So I feel that some of you may go into this part, move out of game mode and say, wow, why is my game mode so dim? I do prefer the way the HDR game mode looks without tone mapping enabled, which I guess would be kind of like an HDIG without the toggle. But if you do feel it's not bright enough, move over to the picture presets, not the gaming presets, the picture presets. Local dimming is medium by default, move that to high. And then in tone mapping, you turn it on and you get that brightness back. And now your game mode is very bright. And then you can mess around with the local dimming and get it however you like. So if you don't feel the image is bright enough, then turn on dynamic tone mapping. The problem with dynamic tone mapping is it really brightens up everything. But if you do feel that that game mode is not bright enough, either change the local dimming or enable or disable tone mapping. Now here with Tekken, we have dynamic tone mapping enabled. It's very bright, very punchy. The specular highlights are there. But I would argue that this image here looks even better. Give it 1 second and pay attention to how deep the image is, but the specular highlights are equally as punchy. So again, if you feel it's brighter or not bright enough, I should say, dynamic tone mapping is going to be the feature you want to enable or disable depending on the game. And it really does depend on the game. But if you do feel it's not bright enough, that is the culprit, and that's the way to get around it, especially if you feel like the image is not bright enough. Here in Dirt 2, we do have dynamic tone mapping enabled. And also if you feel like the image is washed out, get tone mapping off and then go over to local dimming, make sure that is on high. But either way, the game mode looks very good. The image has nice depth, HDR impact is there, and the image is very colorful. You do have some flexibility of image, not everything is grayed out. Let's move into SDR gaming. And SDR gaming, shockingly, is very bright without messing with anything. So I thought that I had HDR forced in the settings. I do not. It is very punchy, it is very bright, which is interesting, but very welcome to see. So I was very happy with SDR brightness. We're going to open the game bar while I'm playing. You can see that now the PC game preset is chosen in lieu of the HDR game mode. You can see in the game bar the HDR is off. But if you go into the picture settings where the tone mapping feature was, it's not going to be there as we are not in HDR. However, you do have an HDR enhance feature to give you kind of a fake HDR if you want it. You can also change the gamma, make it a little bit deeper, but you have this HDR enhancer to force an HDR type mode on. Adds a little bit of brightness and saturation. It's not necessary, but if you feel that it's not bright enough in SDR, it's there. So we have all the bases covered. Very happy with the SDR and HDR performance of game mode. In closing, I'm very happy with the U7Q. It's a nice step up from last year's U7N and does match well with last year's U8N. Very bright, excellent sound with sizes ranging from 55 inches to 100 inches. You're not going to find a mini LED this bright at this price point. Excellent gaming features, beautiful game mode, a lot of flexibility of image, improved Dolby Vision. The local dimming is very good as long as you are dead center. It doesn't have the widest viewing angles, not for color. The color is fine off angle, but for the local dimming, we'll see more blooming off angle. Otherwise, it's excellent and highly recommended. If you're thinking about getting a U8Q versus a U7Q, I'd say get a larger U7Q and call it a day. It is very good. I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing. Love you guys. Take care.
It's better to burn out